Hey guys, do you ever find yourself on questionable chat boards? Do you ever find yourself going down a really concerning train of thought led by most of the Twitter posts that you see? Might you be coming a little bit too extreme? Do you only eat Doritos that have extreme in the name? Do you only ever put Pringles combinations that have no business being together whatsoever? Well, we've got a solution for you. If you're becoming an extremist, come to Facebook.com. We will sort you out before sorting you out. We will pay off your information before you even have a chance to really absorb it. And god damn it, if you don't have 10 sites trying to solicit you for products that they create, that they over-listen to, your conversations without your approved consent to try to get your monetary value away from you. But it's all here for your safety. So if you go onto too many chat boards or don't say the right things and don't put the right amount of hashtags for the right amount of alphabet soup that you choose this week that pertains to the CNN, MSNBC, and God forbid the Biden campaign, you might be an extremist. Please consult your local physician, get a rectal examination performed, and let's figure this extremist thing out together. Hashtag stronger together with Facebook.
David, you happen to get a pop-up on Facebook this week?
I didn't. I don't even use Facebook. I mean, that's for old people now. I only do Cock Talk, which is the new what the kids are using nowadays. So I accidentally made a sexual innuendo trying to play off of TikTok.
Sexual innuendo?
Innuendo.
Wait, okay.
I was trying to play with TikTok, but I made Cock Talk, and it was like, that sounds like Grindr, and I shouldn't have done that.
Well, I don't know if I'm the type of extreme that your commercial was suggesting at the beginning of this episode.
Yes.
But Facebook seems to think I'm extreme, or at least I've been exposed to it. I don't know. Maybe
you only eat Doritos 3D. It's the extreme!
Well, listen.
He only has the extremely crunchy peanut butter. If it doesn't have an extreme, it's not going in your body.
Listen, I mean, the only thing I know based on this pop-up, I and many others in the, I guess what you could call under the umbrella term, the liberty community. The people that are,
it doesn't make sense unless it
have
rhymes.
opinions that are ardently pro-freedom. Let's say that.
Let's just say.
Several of them this week, yours truly included, got, a notification from Facebook about, someone around you may have been extreme. We care about extremeness on Facebook. We'll protect you if you let us.
Meanwhile, we were letting people go to, Where's that university that she said she'd bathe in the blood of white people after she shot him right in the head? Who's that person?
Oh.
Come on, help me out. I'm terrible. I'm terrible at this new stuff.
We had this conversation like 4 weeks ago. You can't spring that on me.
I'm sorry. Okay, keep talking.
But yes, it was, I forget her name. David's going to look it up in the time that I fill the airspace.
I don't like me looking it up. I should probably try to fill the airspace.
No. Look up like most prolific female serial killer of all time, because that's what she is.
Serial killers. Most prolific serial killers.
It was like I don't know, from like back in the Middle Ages or whatever, she supposedly, killed a bunch of people and like bathed in their blood to stay young and stuff like that. It
says,
I don't know if David's going to be able to find her. I'm running out of a way to kill airtime. David, should we just start the episode?
No,
I told you that 5 minutes ago.
We got to get to the.
How can you spring this on me in the episode?
Delphine Lalaurie?
I don't know. That doesn't sound right.
Anyway, so there's a protest that somebody said that she'd walk up and shoot a white person in the head, and that was a bad thing. So I'm going to fill the airwaves now because Dane is a much better Googler.
No.
And when this thing gets up and running, we're going to have an actual we're going to find our own Jamie Vernon. We're going to find our own young Jamie, even though he's going to be old and his name will probably be Tom. So it'll be like old Thomas. Find me that thing within the next 5 minutes.
Elizabeth Bathory.
There we go. See, I had every faith in you.
She was a Hungarian noblewoman. Her dates were August of 1560, until the 21st of August, 1614.
Oh.
So whatever, 54 years old is when she died.
How do we get
But
her?
she was a Hungarian noblewoman, and she was allegedly, I think this is legend. I don't know if this is confirmed, but she's one of the most prolific female serial killers of all time. And let's see, the highest number of victims cited during her trial was 650.
That's pretty intense.
And supposedly she was into occult practices such as like killing young victims, like young daughters of other noble men and women around the country. How the hell did we even get to this?
I was talking about somebody that just had a speech about it the other day, but that
anyway,
wasn't the other one.
She would call the young daughters of different noble men and women around Hungary would let their daughters go to the castle, and Bathory would apparently kill them and take baths in their blood.
Jeez Louise. It was like an impromptu.
What brought us here? What point were you making that?
I was trying to say that there was nothing to be said, that you might be extreme, but we were trying to point out extremists within our culture, and you went back to killing the children of. That's pretty extreme too. So like, so before Facebook
I
goes,
feel like Facebook should have warned us about Elizabeth Bathory.
You should have gone back in time and warned about Bathory. And then come back to our time and be like, you shouldn't have said that one sentence, so you're a little extreme.
To round out this historical little tidbit for you, if you're ever wondering where the term taking a bath comes from, there's your answer.
And if you aren't extreme enough to get hired by Doritos, don't load up my inbox with whether or not I'm an extremist.
Unless Dorito wants to pay us. And then,
exactly. Then I'll gladly give him my Facebook page.
All right. So with that horrendously winding road of an intro banter.
I liked it. It was salty. It was sweet. It was different in the middle.
Well,
had a good mouthfeel.
I got news for you, buddy. This episode isn't getting any cheerier from here on out. So
Woo-hoo!
With that being said, let's
put your hands up. Here we go. Whee!
Welcome to Weapons of Meme Destruction Podcast, episode 50. We are at the half-century mark, David.
The half-centennial.
Look at us go.
I was about to say bicentennial, but that would be 200 because I'm an idiot.
Yes. Which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/50. You can also find us on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you get your apps or your podcasts? Your podcast, yes. Cheese and Rice.
Otherwise known as
Wowzer Bowsers.
AKA'd.
But you can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok.
Just
search Weapons of Meme Destruction.
And if you're too lazy, just put in WMD.
Yeah, wmdpodcast.com. Come to the website and you'll be able to find us anywhere else. With that being said, we're going to jump into today's episode, which we have... I think we've done our due diligence and we've put off the topic long enough to be able to have an educated, informed discussion about it. We're going to broach the topic of critical race theory. It's been a bit of a hot button issue lately, and we know full well right at the outset we're not entitled to an opinion on the subject. We get it. We're the worst people ever.
Well,
we're going to give you our opinion anyway, and you're just going to either like it or not. And maybe you stay and listen, or maybe you don't.
For a little background, we're two white boys from Kansas.
So doubly, quadruply, quintuply not allowed to have.
We are going to be slapped with the R word so fast, which I will be, I'll be hurt. I'll be a little offended by being called an R word because I don't even know what that means.
Well, nowadays, anybody
radical,
who does,
because weren't we already called an extremist?
We're already
just
extremists.
2 minutes ago.
According to Lord Zuckerberg, we are extremists. So
selling out our information to the Russians, that's not extreme enough. But if you say your opinion, God,
damn Russians. So here's basically how the episode is going to flow. We're going to do our best to summarize in their own words what proponents of critical race theory would say about what is trying to be accomplished with the theory. We're not going to try to caricature it. We're not going, and feel free to jump in the comment sections on YouTube, on the webpage, wdpodcast.com/50. Tell us where we get stuff wrong, because this is a very nuanced subject matter, and we don't want to caricature either side. We want to address them on the strongest grounds in favor of their side that we possibly can.
In other words, 50 wasn't a good play. It wasn't a bad place to make it. We made it 50. We made it 50 episodes before we got canceled.
Exactly.
So like,
I mean, that's not nothing.
Let's give it the old college try, and let's try to make this thing work. And if we see 51, by God, it's been nothing short but fun.
So that's the basic starting point, is we want to try to, on their own terms, explain what the theory means, because we feel like there's a lot of mischaracterizing and misunderstandings that circulate around this subject matter. Then we want to get into, as the name of the podcast suggests, we want to get into a meme, because as we say all the time, memes are basically what a culture tells itself about itself. And so if there's a flaw in the meme, there could be a flaw in the reasoning, which could create unintended consequences. So we're going to use a popular meme that's been circulating and kind of point out where maybe critical race theory, as its proponents put it forth, are kind of missing some of the picture. And then based on that, we want to give you our conclusion about, maybe we don't throw the whole thing out. Maybe we acknowledge it for what it is. Maybe there's some value that's there, but not within the way it's being put forward and not within the way it's being argued.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
We want to suggest a more clear, logical path forward.
We're trying to be an ally.
That's what we're trying to accomplish.
Is that what the nuance? Is that what the nomenclature is for the day? We're trying to be an ally for the cause.
I think I wouldn't say an ally so much as I would say, again, maybe that's your view. My viewpoint of it is, I want to try to add another viewpoint to the discussion that crystallizes the understanding of what is actually being discussed.
But to lubricate that transition, I'm trying to use their vernacular to make them more comfortable to go into that transition.
Listen, if a critical race theory proponent gets through 3/4 or all of this episode, I call that a victory.
Right.
Without turning us off and calling us racist and whatever. So that is our solemn vow to you. We're going to try to be as neutral
the
as
most
possible.
insidious thing is, if you're like, I love your race, it's like, oh, well, that's just what a racist would say. It's like, oh, damn it. Like, it's like that Chinese finger trap. The more you pull, the harder it is to get out.
If you're explaining, you're losing.
Exactly.
So with that being said, let's get into our understanding of what a critical race theory opponent would say. So they would say that...
Proponent.
What did I say? Opponent?
Yes.
My bad. They would say that basically they're using the lens that they're using is U.S. law. And they're trying to say, okay, how does U.S. law, how has it historically and how does it still currently intersect with issues surrounding race? And based on that intersection, is there anything that we can understand from historical applications, very specific instances that show that the U.S. structure, if you want to call it systemic racism or something like that, or institutionalized white supremacy, I think is another.
Can I highlight two words? Systemic and institutionalized. Can we highlight both those words?
Come back to those later.
We'll come back to them later.
Okay. So basically how U.S. law intersects with issues surrounding race and how those are expressed in the terms of, that institutional racism and white supremacy and all that kind of stuff. And that basically the, foundational tenets of, Western European societies and cultures are based upon this framework of keeping whites in power or in a higher status, a better position than non-whites, is generally, I think, what the theory is trying to get after. It's trying to say, here's these historical things that happened. They were based on these professed principles of Western civilization. and they're based on white supremacy. And that's why we need to critically examine them, maybe overturn them where necessary, and et cetera, et cetera. I think that is a fair understanding and explanation of what critical race theorists are after.
Well, me being a normal walking around American citizen, I can't refute and I can't offer any addendums to that. That is it.
Oh.
At the sound of the bell,
David, that's
it'll
your
be
sign to stop
12
talking.
o'clock. Holy hell, I'm going to
That
turn
was
into a
interesting.
goddamn pumpkin right now is what I'm going to do.
My bad.
Anyway.
Technical error on co-host
Save it right there. Maybe that'll become part of our show. At the sound of the gong, it will be 12 o'clock. Anyway, no, I mean, that sounds like a fair and reasonable estimate of what they're trying to say. It doesn't seem like you painted it into a certain corner. And the only reason I mentioned those two words to highlight is that those are the two words that stand out in my mind of what we're actually attacking. We're not attacking the theorem in and of itself. We're attacking the basis of the theorem, if I can say that. So,
right.
Dane, with no more further ado.
Right. And before we get into step 2 of the analysis, the kind of meme that brought up this discussion is I just want to put, and this is a direct quote from a proponent of critical race theory. So if any part of my understanding / explanation that came before this was fuzzy, or maybe you think that, I was wrong, again, tell me if I was. I want to do a verbatim quote in their own words of a critical race theory proponent. So Jeffrey Pyle in 1997 argued that critical race theory undermined confidence in the rule of law, writing, quote, "Critical race theorists attack the very foundations of the liberal legal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law."
Now, I know you heard liberal, but you want to define that, Dane?
And we're going to come back to this quote repeatedly throughout the episode, because we think, and again, we're not the first one. There's several, critical race theory, if not direct opponents, but people that are just saying that, hey, be cautious with it, have pointed to this quote as saying, like, this really gets to the heart of what it's after. Because again, that clarification on the liberal legal order, that's referring to like classical liberalism that kind of came out of the Enlightenment period. These ideas of like every man are created equal, or that your rights are endowed to you by your creator, right? They're not given to you by government. You have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness by virtue of your humanity, not because your government says you're allowed to. Like, though, that's the liberal legal order that kind of spurred on the American Revolution and the experiment in self-government. So critical race theory is trying to undermine, they want to attack those foundations. And as a part of that, equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law. Now, we're going to come back to that within the context of what critical race theory is kind of, quote unquote, teaching, because that's ostensibly what their purpose is, right? Is to teach the next generations these situations that show systemic racism and white supremacy and things like that.
It sounds flowery. It sounds nice. It sounds like what you should tell somebody. But when you hear that, but then you see how it's utilized, they don't utilize it appropriately, because again, going back to what we highlighted before, and I'm gonna stop bearing the lead and go into exactly what our standpoint is on it, is that when you hear these things, you hear that it's systemic, it comes from the top, but then the actual affirmation of it is from your neighbor. You elicit it upon your neighbor. Your neighbor's not the one holding you down. Your neighbor's the one, guess what, in the same position that you are. Like, if anything, your neighbor is an ally, as I keep harkening back to the vernacular of their times. Your neighbor is there because he's in your same situation. He's a part of you. He's a part of the America that you understand, not the part of the America that you're being taught through the CRT or whatever we're going through today, like your scope is on the wrong target, is what this entire episode is about. We are going to try to push that scope back onto the direct target, not the target that's telling you what you need to be fuddling with before you get to the main point.
Right. And so to kind of demonstrate that, we're, going to go on to the next part of the analysis. Now that, we've kind of laid out basically what critical race theory is after, what kind of, in their floweriest language, they would say they're trying to do. Let's highlight a meme that's been going around. So it's a meme that references the 1944 Veterans, Veterans Act or whatever. I forget exactly what it's called. But
it'll be in the show notes page.
Yeah, the purpose, and this the meme will actually be up on the YouTube version of this episode as well, so you can see it. But it highlights a difference between a World War II white soldier and black soldier veteran coming back from World War II. And on the left side of the slide, it shows what we were taught. It says the GI Bill helped vets to secure loans to buy a house upon returning from World War II, and it shows a white veteran approaching a house. And then on the right side of the cartoon, it says what we would be taught with critical race theory. And it shows a black veteran standing outside of what you'll find out is going to be a bank, and it says closed. And it says, many banks refuse to approve loans to black vets, resulting in fewer than 100 out of 67,000 mortgages going to non-white borrowers in some suburbs.
Dane, that's intrinsically racist. How are white people getting bank loans while black people of the same population are getting disapproved for the same bank loans? How is that even possible? What could possibly circumvent this? Let all the veterans have equal opportunity for new houses. Right. Who could possibly circumvent that?
So am I gathering your question is to be, how is that legal?
No. I'm gathering that why would a bank discern from one human, as I'm approaching this conversation with, one human from walking into a certain bank into another certain bank? What would have one bank that has no allegiance to another bank? Why would both of those banks not give the African American?
Okay, I see what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, what you're also saying is, why is that legal?
Right. How could that potentially? Because we're way past Jim Crow laws at that 1945 range. So what are we doing there?
Right, and I think your question really gets to the heart of the matter, because if based on this meme alone, you would think, again, what did the meme say? It said that banks didn't approve loans for non-white veterans.
Which is the leaf on the tree.
Right. So the meme is suggesting to you that, it's your local bank operating on principles of the liberal social order of like property rights and deciding to deny, black customers, loans and all of this kind of stuff, right? That's all you would gather from the meme. And the meme is telling you in its own words, that's what critical race theory would teach you. And we have no reason to disagree with that.
It's kind of what they do nowadays, but keep going.
Right. So if the meme is telling us, we assume is made by somebody who agrees with critical race theory, is that that's what critical race theory is, then wouldn't you think, as somebody who looked at that meme and found out that there was more to the story than they're letting on, that you would think that critical race theory is also choosing to leave some historical facts out like they're accusing the other side of doing?
You mean when that magician pulls that rabbit out of a hat, he might have been playing a little sleight of hand game instead of telling me the entire facts, that the rabbit hat had a little compartment that he reaches down in after he shows me that it's empty. He reaches into a secret compartment and pulls out a rabbit. Are you telling me that? Are you telling me that, Dane?
There might be a little bit of switcheroo going on here.
Are you telling me that David Copperfield did not make that elephant disappear on live television?
I'm thinking not.
David Blaine doesn't levitate?
Unless he's a superhuman, grade taking on our forms so that he doesn't scare us.
Who's that dude that looks like a hair metal band guy? Chris Angel
Yeah, that guy.
doesn't balance his mind and his soul on the razor's edge.
No. I think there might be a little sleight of hand going on.
Son of a bitch.
So,
What can I trust in this world then?
what sleight of hand? What are you talking about, Dane? And I think what David's point is prescient, because here's what it's getting to, is that if we're told this is just an innocuous, this is just another academic pursuit just like any other, and we're trying to say, listen, things haven't always been fair in this country, and some, groups of people have had it worse than others, and that's all we're trying to do. Okay, we'll take you at your word. We'll take you at your word that this is what you would teach us.
Are you talking about the Italians?
This is what you would teach us if we would allow critical race theory in our schools.
The Irish.
What are you? So I'm supposed to believe that nothing's being left out.
Germans? Right? Are you talking about the Irish, the Germans, the Italians that were all hated because they were imported? Oh,
that
what are
is
you talking about?
That will feature in the point. But let me get to the point. Is that there was a book written, and I mean, again, this isn't just one source. These are historical facts that was laid out succinctly in a book called The Color of Law. And I want to give a shout out to the Facebook page, Meme Policeman, because they were the ones that went through and pulled the excerpts from the book and really dove in on this meme and gave a lot of the firepower that we're getting ready to bring to this episode. So definitely follow them on Facebook, become an extremist like us, and, have another avenue for getting memes destroyed for you. So a couple quotes from The Color of Law about where this discrimination that critical race theorists would tell us has happened in history, where it's really come from. So here's a quote. The VA for the GI Bill of 1944, quote, not only denied African Americans the mortgage subsidies to which they were entitled, but frequently restricted education and training to lower-level jobs for African Americans who were qualified to acquire greater skills. So, that's not your local little bank refusing service and being a racist. That's directly from the central power federal government itself. In the VA bill, right, they denied the mortgage subsidies. Now, if you're going to ask me about that meme in general, you say, okay, bank owner in the 1940s. White customer comes in, black customer comes in. And that bank knows that both of them are veterans. And the VA has said, hey.
By the way, both of them have the same opportunity to succeed or to fail. Keep going forward.
And the bank is told they're both veterans. This one's white. I will federally subsidize, I will federally guarantee your loan to him. If you loan to that white soldier and allow him to get into a home and he defaults, the federal government is going to back it up and pay you off in full. So as the bank, you have zero liability for making this loan.
You only have money to make.
Why would you not make that loan? Now, that same Veterans Administration tells you, the bank owner, this veteran soldier who has the same skills and aptitude as the white soldier, we're not going to federally guarantee his loans. Therefore, he is inherently a riskier investment for you to loan to, not because he's any worse than the white veteran, but because you're not guaranteed that if he does happen to default, you're going to get your money back.
And as a bank, you're only ever running the numbers on risk versus gain.
That's your entire
entire
function as a bank, right? You want to make loans that are going to obviously make you money,
handcuffed,
but that are as little risk as possible.
But they're also the easiest scapegoat. Like, well, the banks were giving you the loans, so that was the person you saw first. So it must be them that are standing in your way, right? It's like a bullfighter. It's like the bull is always going for the red cape in front of him, right? But it's too busy going for the red cape to see that the guy manipulating the red cape is his true adversary. And sometimes he realizes it, and then sometimes things go very awry very quickly.
Right. Now, and again, I revert you back to the meme that said, if critical race theory was allowed to be taught, this is what they would teach you. They would teach you that the banks were denying black veterans loans. Okay, that's a historical fact of something that happened. But if you're not...
But if you put the onus on the wrong person,
right, from that meme alone, before we got into the historical aspect of what really went on with the VA bill as dictated by the federal government, which, again, who was responsible for that? FDR, Truman, right? Truman at the end of the war, FDR throughout the war. So again, these are progressive liberal heroes, democratic heroes that put this into place, not racist bank owners. So would you have gotten that from the meme itself? And if the meme is telling you that this is what critical race theory would have taught you, and it's not giving you the full picture, is it completely irrational and unreasonable for you to have some skepticism about what their motives are?
And by the way, if you think this doesn't apply to today, David, this is so long ago. Why? Like, we've grown. Like, CRT applies today so much differently. Well, didn't we just have a president that got elected that said, if you don't agree with me or if you don't want to vote for me, you ain't black? But at the same time, he also was the backing voice behind one of the most, I don't want to say egregious bills, but I will say egregious bills against the same community that he's just expected to vote him into office back when he was a senator. Am I wrong?
No. And let's give you a few more data points. We're not going to get into, because, the meme policeman did a great job and provided several quotes from the Color of Law book, which we encourage you to read. But we just want to put up a couple more data points to just show you this wasn't one president and one administration that did this. This is
systematic.
Again.
And what was the other one? Liberal? It was liberal, systematic, and endemic.
Well, I mean,
what was the go back to the highlighted words, and we went for
the point is to the critical race theorist point of systemic racism.
There you go, systemic. That's
to any extent that was true. Yeah, it was true from not only the central authority, but the progressives of the central authority that are still lionized in today's. Look at AOC and Bernie. The first one they'll point to back to is FDR, right? We planned in war, we can plan in peace. He got us out of World War II and the Great Depression with planning, so we're going to get out of climate change and everything else with planning, right? These people are still lionized in that political persuasion, which would seek to support and aggrandize critical race theory. And so what we're saying is, okay, take them at their word. If these are the things that they hold up as their ideal, take them at their word. So just a couple more data points. So we already gave you the VA data point. What people don't realize is between the Civil War period and the early 1900s, the Federal Civil Service had been making great progress in terms of integrating Black people in leadership roles, even rising as high of responsibilities as supervising white office workers. But this all came to a stop in 1912 when liberal progressive Saint Woodrow Wilson was elected president, and he implemented and approved segregation in government offices. That's where it started, this whole concept of segregation. Right? And who was one office responsible for that?
Who would do that?
The Assistant Secretary of the Navy at the time, who was none other than Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
A future president.
In 1915, and here's a quote from a publication called The New Republic, which was early on, but a high-level publication in the progressive movement of the early 20th century. And the magazine had this to say, is that it argued for residential segregation until, quote-unquote, Negroes ceased wanting to amalgamate with whites. Again, a progressive stalwart of opinion in the early 20th century. And just one last thing. So Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. Again, think about AOC. She posits her grand plan as the Green New Deal, right? She clearly holds up the New Deal as something to be emulated. So this is another quote from the book. Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal created the nation's first public housing for civilians who were not engaged in defense work. The administration constructed separate projects for African Americans, segregated buildings by race, or excluded African Americans entirely from developments.
And you know how they advertised this one? It was to help them because they can't help themselves. Much like the same voter restriction laws that we're seeing today, that they keep saying that we're trying to help these people, but in their own ignorance are kind of being slightly racist. So It's that old hearkening of the we'll sell you a bill of goods based on premises that are altruistic, but at the end, it's going to be your downfall. And it happens again and again, systemic, over and over. It's only meant for you to fail at the end because you aren't competent enough to succeed on your own.
And I mean, one last data point with the FDR thing is, the Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, that came to be under the FDR administration, which is still in existence today. It had appraisal standards that included white-only requirements. Racial segregation now became an official requirement of the federal mortgage insurance programs, meaning the FHA wouldn't insure mortgages for Black homeowners, and it wouldn't back housing projects that were not segregated.
Dang, come on.
So like all the way down the line, the federal government, in no uncertain terms, had policies top to bottom which told local and community banks and anybody else that would loan, when they said, okay, white applicant, Black applicant, in all respects they're the same earning capacity, same education, same everything. Should I loan to this person or that person? And all throughout the line, every federal program from Woodrow Wilson through FDR and even beyond said, we will support you if you loan to whites or that you segregate the communities, but not Blacks. And not integrated communities.
What you're saying is, so they've been doing a really extremely good job of marketing, saying that it's our fault, the people living in these subsidized homes that we'd probably prefer not to live in. But it's our fault that we're living there with these same people that are forced to live there, and we're the ones holding them back. It's like, hold the people accountable that are holding you there. It doesn't seem. That's why we highlighted the two words systemic, and what was the other one?
Well, systemic racism and white supremacy.
Correct. So it's just because the system doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean that it works for your neighbor any better, because he's in the same situation as you are. So it's like, don't hate your neighbor, hate the people that you vote in there, and hold them accountable. Hold them accountable for what they do while they're in there. And don't just buy the rhetoric every 4 years. That's all I'm saying.
Right, which is a point we come back on this podcast frequently. It doesn't matter what race, what gender, what sexual orientation, what nationality, what anything your neighbor
cares.
It doesn't matter what group your neighbor is. I guarantee you, if you talk to them, you will have much more in common than you will have with anybody that, whether they share your class and status or not, sitting in Washington, D.C., an elected official, than your local representative has.
Again, I'm going to go back to the same metaphor that I keep drawing.
People in power are not on your side.
The same metaphor I keep drawing is that no one's going to swim out to you while you're drowning and go, hey, what's your political standpoint? Hey, did you vote for Trump or did you vote for Biden? Hey, what do you think about AOC? Do you think she's a good person or not? What do you think about the Green Deal? Like, they're going to save you. You're an American. If you're in trouble, we're going to help you. Those are your allies. All those people up on Capitol Hill, they don't care. They really don't care. So keep your friends close and your enemies, de-elect them.
So tracking back to critical race theory, because we've gone a little bit afield here.
But it's apropos.
Is that if we take it on its own word, we're not trying to caricature it, taking it on its own words. What are you trying to teach? You say you're trying to teach that banks denied, Black veterans loans vis-a-vis whites. And we're saying that if that's the case, but there's this whole other part of the picture that you're leaving out, that a healthy skepticism of what the true motives of the proponents of the theory are, is warranted. And to have those skepticisms is not anything nefarious or supportive of white supremacy or institutional race. Because again, we can sit here all day and agree with you that all of those policies that we just laid out, from Woodrow Wilson all the way down through FDR, from the GI Bill through the FHA, all of those are, yes, examples of systemic institutional racism.
And guess what?
But where is the power structure? It's not based on simple, natural rights theory or property rights or anything like that. It's based on some racist individuals that had way too much power that decided to put their racism into action. And because they had high seats of power, they could affect a lot more lives than they otherwise could have.
Let's not forget a very poignant detail. They also probably played you for a fool. They probably said that they were going to go in there and fight for your rights.
Well, are still to this day.
Exactly. That's my point. It's like the script doesn't change. The script hasn't changed since 1945 to now. Like, they're going to tell you what they need to tell you or what they think you want to hear to get those places of power. And guess what? Once they get those places of power, then you'll really see their actions. Then you'll really see their intent. And if you keep putting them in those places of power, i.e. Pelosi, McConnell, Schumer, Graham, keep going down the list. It doesn't matter. All the people that have been in office for those many years, they have sold off your freedoms and your abilities to the highest bidder for their own financial gain. Hold the people accountable that should be held accountable, not your neighbors. And they're going to tell you that your neighbors are your enemies because they don't want you to look at them. Because once you start looking at them, by God, you're going to find it real quick, real fast. So that's the divide and conquer mentality that we always talk about on this podcast.
So you may be wondering, you may be thinking to yourself, Dane and David, okay, I get it. You're saying they're not giving us the whole picture, even if we accept them on their grounds that they're a theory and they're just trying to be educational. If they're leaving something out, I should be suspect. But what are they really teaching? Do you have any thoughts about that? And if you're asking that question, the answer is yes, we do. And this is where I want to track back to that quote that we put at the end of explaining it about what, Jeffrey Pyle said critical race theory is trying to do. And just to reiterate, that quote is, critical race theorists attack the very foundations of the liberal legal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law. Now, you might think, if they're just trying to teach about systemic racism, why are they leaving out all the systems that come from a centralized progressive authority, an authority that they would, in all other instances, seem to agree with? And when you put it in context of that quote that I just read you, if the liberal legal order is about individual rights, right, the supremacy of the individual over the collective, right, and we think about how was COVID approached in this last year, something very topical that everybody can relate to. All of the narratives around COVID were always to subordinate the individual to collective. You may not be sick, but you have to stay home for the good of the collective. You may not be sick, but you have to wear a mask for the good of the collective.
It's a tool.
You may not be sick, but you have to go get vaccinated for the good of the collective.
It's a tool.
You may, everything is subordinated to what's good for the masses. Now,
it's a tool.
This is not a new debate. This happened all throughout the 20th century. This is, and we can draw the analogies between Marxist class struggle and critical race theories, race struggle. And we can say, well, this is a Marxist, a communist-inspired theology or theory. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Obviously, they're going to deny it where it's not convenient to admit it. But the point is that when they explicitly leave out the entire part of the narrative that would come from a centralized, powerful authority, right? Because it's inconvenient because their political forebearers are the ones that enacted this stuff. And they only point to the individual, think about the meme, the individual bank owner acting with his property rights and denying service to a black veteran. They can't admit that the central progressive authority was responsible for this. because it undercuts the whole theory. If the theory is to upend the legal order, upend the idea of the supremacy of the individual over the collective, if that's what they're trying to overthrow, then it makes sense why they leave the political component out.
What I'll argue is that not only have they learned from what they've done, they've become exceedingly proficient at it. So now, instead of just attacking our basic logic and reason and wherewithal for our neighbors' well-being, now they're attacking science. Now they're attacking gender. Now they're attacking this. Now they're attacking that. Like, all I'm saying is that they made scientific study, a biological study, anatomical study, a point of their side, and when it didn't agree with them, they made it false science. They took the basic knowledge bringing efficacy and brought it to its knees, to where it's now, because it started with fake news. It started with fake news with Trump. Now we can't trust the information that's coming in. Now it went to science. Science, the literal thing that told us that gravity exists, that we aren't the center of the universe, that the sun doesn't revolve around us. They took that and turned it into whether or not it agrees with their standpoint or it doesn't. Dane, you're sitting there in antiquity, so I've gotta release.
In antiquity?
Yes, you're frozen. You're frozen.
I'm a statue.
Yes, you're frozen with fear of what I'm gonna say next. So I want you to please parlay into this.
No, I wanted to. I feel like maybe our explanation on this point has been a little from both of us. I feel like I talked too much on the last one in terms of. The point is, what do we think the critical race theorists are really after? Centralized power. Because that's exactly what their political heroes did, right? That's what Wilson did. That's what FDR did. But they don't want to admit that their political heroes were the progenitors, the movers and shakers of the very institutionalized racism and systemic racism.
All I'm going to say,
the white supremacy that they're talking about, it's their political progressive heroes that did it. And the reason why they can't admit that is because to admit that would to go against the upending of the liberal order, because they want to get in power themselves. They want to be the next FDR and command and control society from the top down like their political heroes did. And in order to do that, the individual has to be subjected to the majority.
And all I'm going to say is that this machine that has been doing it since at least
1912.
Exactly.
But earlier.
I was going to say 1945. It was just where we started this meme from. But yes, 1912, because they've been media's existence.
Well, Wilson. So.
But anyway, they've got it down to a science. They've got it down to a science to where, like, if something comes out that doesn't agree with their narrative, they will immediately attack the source. And if they can't discredit the source, then they'll get out in front of the source and make it seem like that science or this knowledge or that knowledge. They're literally controlling science, but then they'll use the one thing that was supposed to be devoid of any government, devoid of any manipulation ever, like the advancement of knowledge. We are reaching the Spanish Inquisition levels right now. That's where we're at. So to relinquish that vessel that has such an intricate, I mean, its tentacles are in every aspect of our civilization. It's like we have to have a culmination.
So, Dane and David, are you just here to complain about critical race theory and not offer anything? Are you just here to just piss and moan and be closeted white supremacists or whatever supporters of institutional racism?
Yes.
Is that what
I'm a secretive Ku Klux Klan member. I don't even know what any of their chants are. I'm studying my handbook.
And to that, we're going to say no, despite David's comical joke, which I'm sure is going to be soundbited
comical
later
joke.
And Jesus.
No.
Anyway, no.
Definitely.
What we are saying though is that you don't have. There's this all or none principle that's going on here that's making both sides talk past each other. So to use the meme for an example about, black veterans being discriminated against vis-a-vis their white counterparts, right? Okay, that's a historical fact. That's something that happened. It's not absolute definitive proof of the validity of critical race theory because, again, as we've laid out throughout this episode, there's an entire other half or more than half of the picture that needs to be discussed.
Pull back the curtain.
So rather than upend the liberal legal order, upend this whole idea of, again, natural rights, property rights, all of that kind of stuff, we would say, yes, the United States ostensibly was founded under these principles of the individual with having the primacy over the collective. And we would say that in these instances where black veterans were discriminated against and all kinds of other instances, we're not saying critical race theory is confined to
doesn't stop
this
there.
One example.
Right.
But we are saying that rather than throw all of that out, we would say those are the principles we still want to live up to. And that whether it be as a nation, as a government, as a society, as a culture, whatever, we have failed to live up to those ideals.
I'll give you our vice president. DA, keeping a bunch of people in jail. Keep going.
Oh, you mean the modern iterations that are,
right,
are all about equality.
The indentured slavery that she's keeping them on false pretenses for free labor as indentured slavery.
Or Biden doubling the local police expenditures and giving
heaven
more.
Forbid we go into all the vernacular.
Yes.
Heaven forbid. But God damn it, if it's not intrinsic and if it's not systematic.
But the point is, we can teach these historicals. You don't need critical race theory to teach that black veterans were discriminated against vis-a-vis white veterans. But to have a holistic look at it, you also need to understand where those policies came from.
But also,
and that if we are just about teaching accurate history so that we can learn as a society and move forward from those practices, which we aren't proud of people that came before us making,
to harken on that.
The whole thing needs to be addressed so that we can talk about the entire historical narrative, and we don't have to have these other revolutionary desires to upend the liberal legal order and move to this state, this not state, but this framework where all of society takes priority over the individual.
But both of those people that we just aforementioned are role models within our country right now. So all we're saying is stop reading the narrative. Stop going with the narrative, because the DA of California, she's the vice president of our country. If you even look into the smallest modicum of her history, there's nothing to be teaching your daughter of how to achieve their goals through what she did it. There's nothing to achieve your goals from what Biden did it. These people that are in power right now are the exact thing you've been fighting for years and are complaining about every day.
And I mean, the reason he brings up a good point, the reason why Kamala Harris is such a prime example here is not just because
they're selling you a hero when she plays mostly the villain.
Is not just because she checks a bunch of diversity boxes herself as a person, but it's the fact that if we're going to say that institutional racism and white supremacy exists, which again, we could look back at history and say, yes, the drug war has disproportionately impacted people of color. That's a fact. I don't think anybody could argue that based on the numbers. So then, just because she happens to fit a lot of those demographic models, but was responsible as the DA of the most populous state in the country of putting people that were more greatly oppressed by the drug war behind bars for long periods of time, you would say that she's contributing to the system, no?
And then also circumvented investigations into wrongfully accused victims of these crimes and stood in the way just for her own career advancement. She threw other people's lives away. So all I'm saying is, don't beatify this woman. That is the exact thing you should be fighting to tear down.
Well, that, or I mean, just take the individual out of the picture and think, okay, why do not completely.
They think you're stupid.
Not completely out of the picture, but like, okay,
she's black.
Let's just take the example of critical race theory. Kamala Harris says, I support it. So therefore, with all of this historical factual background, you look at that and say, you either fall on one side of the fence or the other.
What have you done?
If you agree with it, you're on her side. And if you disagree with it, you're on the other side.
What has she done with it?
If neither side has the entire historical framework and they're just arguing, correct, if you like it or don't like it, then you're a bad person, then you're not making a decision that's based on reason. You're making a decision that's based on emotion. And the critical race theory proponents, such as Kamala, are not being honest with you in terms of what their goals and aspirations and motivations are with the theory when they don't give you the biggest pieces to the puzzle.
And they're counting on your ignorance and willful ignorance not to look further. And that is the crux of the matter. So
let this episode be your first step to digging further. You know, obviously, we can only accomplish so much. We shoot for 30 minutes. This one's already at an hour. Jesus.
We're going to go broke.
We're going broke. But, you know, this one
I'm going to have to start working the back alleys.
Had a lot of information in it. But it should be, you know, something to be a jumping off point for you to dig further and to hopefully share with friends and family that maybe feel strongly one way or another about critical race theory and can come to hopefully a neutral viewpoint and say, well, if I'm going to make a decision, I want to have all of the information possible to make that decision.
We went down swinging the sword of virtue, chopping at that monster of
I can guarantee you that any proponents that made it to minute 30 sure as hell didn't make it to minute 56. For no other reason
I'd certainly hope that you guys are just gluttons for punishment at that point. So other than that.
So with that being said, find this episode at wmdpodcast.com/50. Search for us on YouTube. Just type in Weapons of Meme Destruction. Also on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
Anywhere you can find podcasts, we're there.
Thing. Link up with us. Comment on our posts. And
we're free. You know, we're for free. You're getting all this for free.
Share us with other folks.
Just let us be your little secret that you spread with everybody else within your circle.
With that being said, 50's in the books. Ladies and gentlemen,
my goodness.
We are just about to get merch up on the website. And once that happens, watch out, Katie barred the doors. I don't know what that means. I've just heard that growing up.
Katie barred, so I got to grab a chick named Katie and then just put her up,
slap her on the doors, and nobody will be able to get in.
Sounds fun. What do I do after that?
And once that happens, hopefully we're going to the moon
something
with this
illicit.
Podcast.
Oh my goodness,
Jesus! All right, we're gonna end this episode. It's already too long, and David's.
I'm gonna get us canceled if we haven't been already.
So with that being said, over and out. We will see you next week for 51.
Bye, guys.